Jump into the lesson today. Is that all right? If you're ready, say I'm ready. Okay. All right. Good. If you're new with us, you're coming in on the last week of a series that we're calling Mindset. And what we've been talking a lot about is we've been talking about how the church does a really good job of being like, give your heart to Jesus. And like, isn't it great how much he loves you? Doesn't that feel so good? And we do a really good job of like, go serve. And here are places you can serve. And here's places you can serve in the church. But there's something in between feelings and serving, and it's called the way we think. I mean, our thoughts can be crazy. And the fact that Jesus, when he sees us, not only sees our behavior and our feelings, but he sees the way we actually think is frightening to me. Because I don't know about you, but sometimes my thoughts are ugly. And what I found is there's a little bit of comfort that comes from knowing that Jesus sees that and loves me anyway. Like even when I think crazy things, the God of the universe still wants to partner with me. And I think that's amazing. And so we've been talking about what do we do with our mindset and what are things that need to change. And we ended with this statement 2 weeks ago that the outcomes of our life can be transformed as God's presence gives power to change our mindset. That if the outcomes of our life, the thing that we want our life to become, are transformed not by our hard work, but by the power of Jesus. And that when we let Jesus come in our lives, things will change. Now, does that mean that if you become a Christian, everything's going to be just fine? Ask a Christian near you who's been doing this for a long time, because the answer is no. It's still messy, and it's still difficult. But when you let God in control, when you let Jesus in your life, man, the truth is your mind starts to change. And you start to see things differently. Not because of your power, but because of his. So the statement we made last week was, but it can't be that simple, right? I mean, come on, Tim. Like, I become a Christian, and I follow Jesus, and I pray a little bit, and I come to church on Sundays, and you're telling me that my mind and my thought life is just magically going to be better? No, it doesn't work that way. In fact, the statement that we keep making over and over again is that it's war. Do you know this? Do you know that there's a battle that's happening in your mind at all times? And this battle is a battle between who God wants you to be and who you naturally want to become in the flesh, or who the enemy would like you to become. There's a battle that's just constantly going on. And the minute you've got it figured out, I promise you there's a new battle coming. I can't tell you how many people I've sat with who struggled with addiction. And they've gotten clean and they've gotten healthy, and it's been a year, 2 years since they struggled with alcohol. And now all of a sudden they got this anger issue that they can't reconcile. That's really messing with them. And then after a while of handing that over and things changing, now the anger's gone. But you know, like pornography is looking real good right now. And it seems like there's this swing that goes back and forth where the minute you think you've got it figured out, there's a new battle because it's war. Folks. And if you think following Jesus is just going to end the war, it won't. The promise is that he will be with you in the war. The war continues, and you don't know what's coming next because war is unpredictable. So today, 2 weeks ago, we talked about how to remove thoughts from our life that don't honor the Lord and replace them, right? Removal and replacement of those thoughts. Last week, we talked about how to take every thought captive. Every thought, not just the ones that we want to change, every thought, because we're trying to change who we are. And the Lord wants to change all of us, not just the pieces that we think he should. But today, in the unpredictability of war, we have to ask the question, what about the thoughts that are coming that I don't even know about yet? It's war, right? So that means there's things coming that I'm not prepared for. There's diagnoses coming in some of our lives that we're not prepared for. There's death coming that we're not prepared for. There's temptation coming that we don't even know we're tempted to even try yet. So what do we do with the thoughts that we don't even know are coming? Well, let me just say out loud to begin with, I don't know what's coming either, okay? So whatever your life looks like for the next 5 years, I don't have a plan for you because I have no idea what I don't know, and I have no idea what's coming, but we need to spend time today talking about what do we do when they come. So a lot of the conversation about our thought life in the New Testament comes from one specific person. His name's Paul. If you don't know who Paul is, Paul was actually a Pharisee, which means he was like a law follower, and he held everyone else to the standard of the law of the Old Testament. And Paul, at the time his name was Saul, was really good at arresting Christians. Like he was finding Christians and putting them in jail. Not only that, he was good at persecuting them in other ways through violence. In fact, the very first Christian ever to be killed for their faith in the book of Acts, a man named Stephen, it says that Paul says he was holding the jackets or the coats of the men who killed him. I mean, Paul's a bad dude. But Jesus, he encountered Jesus and everything changed. And through a long story I won't share because you don't want to listen to 2 sermons, what I would tell you this morning is that after he encountered Jesus, everything was different. And Paul takes the message of the gospel throughout Europe in a way we had never seen before. And his first stop in Europe was at a place called Macedonia, which is in the northeast side of Greece. And the first city was a place named Philippi. And the first person was a woman named Lydia, who Paul shared Jesus with Lydia, and everything changed. So, Paul decided it was good to write to them and help them become everyday disciples and teach them how to follow hard after the Lord. And that letter we call the letter of Philippians in the New Testament. So, when you're writing a letter, usually the most important things you want to say, you say last. So what we're doing is we're going to Philippians chapter 4 to some of the last things that Paul said to wrap up this letter while he's teaching the people in Philippi to follow hard after the Lord. Are you ready? All right, Philippians 4, starting at verse 4, it says this: "Rejoice in the Lord always." Everybody say always. I will say it again, rejoice. It's really interesting that Paul phrases it this way because you know how like in English, when we want to say something with a lot of excitement, we add an exclamation point on the end? So my children tell me that I'm guilty of too many exclamation points when I text. Like I get real excited about something and I'm like, hi, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. And my kids are like, Dad, you're like a Progressive commercial, right? Would you please chill out on the exclamation points? But that's how we share with people that we're excited, right? So there's a difference between hi and hi exclamation point, right? There's something more to it. Well, in Hebrew, when they wrote, they didn't actually use exclamation points that way. Okay, they didn't actually use exclamation points at all. What they would do is they would just repeat it. So like if they were excited, if something was big, it was big, big. Right? So when you go back into the Hebrew text, you'll find like words repeated, and that's their way of raising the volume. So Paul knows that. So Paul says, rejoice. I'll say it again. Rejoice. He's raising the volume on rejoicing. Rejoicing doesn't mean we always throw a party. What rejoicing means is that when we look at God, He's worthy of our praise, and He gets it all the time, always. So, do we rejoice when things are going amazing? Yes. Do we rejoice when things are terrible? Yes. Do we rejoice when it's just a normal day and nothing's terrible or amazing? Yeah, because we're supposed to rejoice always, and I'll say it again. Rejoice. Right? It's a lifestyle. Then he goes on to say, let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. That word near means near in proximity, like He's close. It also means near like in time. But the Lord is near, and we shouldn't take our eyes off Him. The word that bothers me in this text is the word gentleness, to be honest with you. Let your gentleness be evident. Wait a minute. Like I just told you, we're at war. There is no room for gentleness in war. Could you imagine like two armies and they're like marching up to each other. And they've got their like shields and their spears. I don't know why, but I'm in like the first century army and they're like hitting the sword on the, they're making noise and all their armor's clanking. And then they get right across the field from each other and they all drop their armor and go, bring it in. Just, come on. I'm going to let my gentleness be evident. It's ridiculous. Right? But we're supposed to let our gentleness be evident to all. Why should we be gentle if it's war? It doesn't make any sense. Can I tell you that Jesus had the same struggle on this earth? I mean, think about it. The Pharisees bring to him a woman who's committed adultery, and they're ready to stone her. And Jesus doesn't pick up a stone. He picks up the woman and says, go and sin no more. I mean, the same Jesus who was arrested by real soldiers in the Garden of Gethsemane, right before he's taken, right? They're trying to grab him, and Peter chops off the ear of one of the soldiers. And Jesus' response is like, hey, don't do that. And he grabs the ear and heals the man. The same Jesus who has the power and authority and even the following, if he's just a man, to really create conflict, allows himself to be nailed to a cross and to die, even though he had done nothing wrong. See, what I want you to hear this morning is that Jesus chooses gentleness. In a world full of violence, in a world full of power-hungry people, Jesus chose gentleness. Some of you, because I would encourage you to read this in context, some of you are thinking, well, he didn't choose gentleness the one time when he tipped over the tables, right? No. He did. See, because that was his father's house, and they were defiling it. And with all the power at his disposal, he chose gentleness. Jesus chooses gentleness. And what I would tell you this morning, church, is that when we choose gentleness, we show the world the power and testimony of Jesus. It's called the gospel. Jesus died for you. He lived on this earth and he died for you. And then after he was dead, because he's the Son of God, he didn't stay dead. He rose from the grave. And he's coming back. It's the gospel. And when we present the gospel to people in gentleness, it has the same power as Jesus had. But you know what we'd rather do? We'd rather argue amongst ourselves. We'd rather try to figure out who's really right about the end times. What does baptism really mean? What's communion really? We'd rather infight instead of choosing gentleness among each other. And then when we go out to the world and heaven forbid somebody vote differently than us, or see life differently than us, or see choice differently than us, and we choose anger with them too. And I'll tell you, Jesus chose gentleness. He wasn't weak. He wasn't thoughtless. He was just gentle. When we choose gentleness, it points people to the Jesus that we love and serve. There is another choice, by the way. You can choose the opposite of gentleness, which is not harshness. The opposite of gentleness is control. Instead of living in a way that's counterculture, I'm just going to control everything. I'm going to control what happens in my life. I'm going to control what happens to the people I love. I'm going to control my future. I'm going to control my promotions. I'm going to search and fight for something that I want because I'm in control. And let me tell you, that's a path that works well for many people. Not many followers of Jesus, but many people. Here's the problem. When you're in control and you're striving for what you want, there is something coming that you're not ready for, and it's called anxiety. Because when you're in control, then all of a sudden you become afraid of what's next. Do you see that? Because you can't see the future. So you start to go, man, what if this doesn't work? What if I lose my job? What if I don't have enough money in retirement? What if my marriage falls apart? What if what the doctor said about me actually happens and nothing changes? And all these fears come in, and we begin to become anxious about what our future looks like because we're the ones that are trying to be in control. Paul addresses this in the very next verse, in verse 6. He says, do not be anxious about anything. But in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. This is interesting. So in every situation, we're supposed to use prayer and petition. Those words sound like they could mean the same thing. Like it's like prayer and more prayer. So let me help you. Prayer is really your daily general rhythm of communicating with the Father. Do you know that communication makes relationships healthy? I'm not just talking about us and God. I'm talking about like all relationships. You understand communication is an important part of relationships. As a counselor in my previous career, what I would tell you is when I sat down with a couple and I said, what do you think's happening here that's not working? The first thing was always communication. She doesn't hear me. He doesn't hear me. It was that. Communication matters, and it matters with our relationship with the Lord too. When we communicate often and consistently with God, it changes how we relate to Him. So prayer matters, that daily communication. But here's something else that happens. When you're in a relationship with healthy communication, you can ask for specific things. That doesn't mean you always get them, but you can be real specific. Like, Lord, I need you tomorrow at this appointment that I'm going to. God, this is what I want to hear from this doctor, and I need you with me. You can petition the Lord with specific things. You may not get what you want, but He'll hear you. He'll hear you. Prayer and petition. And then we're supposed to offer thanksgiving. See, like, I want to thank God after I get what I want, don't you? Like, Lord, if I could come home today and my tree would produce money, that would be awesome. So then, like, I get home today and there's like, I got to rake up hundreds off the ground or whatever. I'm going to be like, thanks, God. Thanks for doing what I said. That's not what's being offered here by Paul. What Paul is saying is in the prayer and petition, we offer thanksgiving as we request, not when it happens. Can you pray for something? Thank God for Him listening and who He is in your life, even if you never get it. That's the question. With thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, everybody say peace of God. The peace of God, which transcends all understanding. Isn't that a fun statement? The peace of God, which you're incapable of understanding. Like this, you should have this peace of God even though you'll never quite understand what it actually is. It transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. So what I'm hearing so far is there's a call for us to be gentle and to live with gentleness. And what guards our hearts and our minds is peace. Like in the middle of war, in the middle of the fight and the struggle and the things that run through my mind that I feel like are attacking me, what I'm supposed to respond with is gentleness and the peace of God, which I can't even understand. That's frustrating to me. Do you know what I want? I want to give my life to the Lord and Him look at the list of angels that He has and decide which one should be my bodyguard. And I want that angel to like float down, but I don't want him to be no like skinny angel. You know what I mean? Like I want the angel who looks buff and who like stands next to me and like walks around with me. And when people or thoughts approach me that shouldn't, he just goes, "You're too close." Like, pull back. You're in Tim's space. Right? That's what I want because that makes sense to me, that there would be a bodyguard who would keep me from harm. But what is being offered to me is not an angel on God's behalf. What's being offered to me is actually the peace of God. Like I'm being offered something that's from God to me with no one in between. And even though I'll never understand it, I guess I'm supposed to just accept that it's more powerful because it is. The peace of God will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. The thing I want you to hear this morning that may be the most important thing I say is that his peace is your guard. Y'all, I don't know what you're going through, and I know that sounds crazy. And there are some of you who are struggling in your own mind. I mean, it's a struggle every day. It passes my understanding. It transcends anything I can understand. But I guess what I want you to hear this morning, even though I don't understand it, I still believe that the peace of God is our protection. The peace of God somehow has the ability to help us move in a healthier direction. Maybe it passes all of our understanding because when we think peace, we think soft, but peace is actually the most powerful thing in the room. Maybe that's why we struggle. What I want you to hear is that we must not accept anxiety as a normal part of our life. Church, anxiety steals peace. Anxiety steals it. It steals it from you. And I know there are some of you in the room who have biological issues that cause anxiety. Some of you may be on medication for anxiety. Some of you may see a therapist to talk about your anxiety. Some of you may just struggle every day you wake up and you know you need help, but you're not reaching out for it. And what I would tell you is I'm not saying stop it and that magically fixes it. What I'm saying is we should never live a lifestyle where anxiety is part of it and we just say it's fine. We should never live a lifestyle where we look at anxiety and just go, it's just part of who I am. I'm just an anxious person. Because anxiety steals peace, and peace is our guard. Do not accept anxiety in your life. Get help. Anxiety will steal your peace. But we must accept and embrace prayer and petition that leads us to thanksgiving before anything happens that we want to happen. Because through prayer and petition, in rhythm in our lives, we find peace. Anxiety will steal your peace. Prayer and petition over time with thanksgiving will give you peace. Don't miss it. Let's move on to verse 8. Finally, brothers and sisters, here we go. Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice. And the God of peace will be with you. Paul, if you're used to Paul's writing, if you read any of his letters in the New Testament, he loves lists with commas. Like he's a huge fan of 30 words with commas in between each one. Every time Paul does that, what he's not doing is making an exhaustive list. He's trying to make a point. These kinds of things, right? It's not about, the 8 things in this list. It's about all these kinds of things, and he's using 8 with commas in between to represent the kinds of things that we need to put in our life. Just like when Paul makes a list of sin, he's not making a list of specific sin in Romans chapter 1. He's not making a list of specific sin, he's drawing you to the idea of sin by listing many sins. Okay? So let's look at his list here. His list is true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, and praiseworthy. Tell me about the last time that you had some really negative thoughts and tell me where those words fit in your mind as you were thinking them. Maybe it was true. It's possible for something to be true and not be the rest. But man, these are characteristics and qualities that if we will point our mind to, actually keep thoughts away that shouldn't be there. There's not room for hateful thoughts when you're thinking on lovely things. But I guess what I want to offer you today is I don't think Paul is just creating a list of characteristics. I think Paul is describing Jesus. When I look at this list, I see Jesus. I see someone who's righteous and honorable or noble. Someone who is always true. He is the way, the truth, and the life. I see someone who's holy or pure, someone who's always so loving. In fact, God is love. I see someone who's admirable, someone that I want to be like, who is excellent in every way. And there is no one who has ever walked this earth who is more praiseworthy than Jesus himself. Folks, if you're having trouble thinking on these things, I would ask you to think on the person who represents these things. Think on the character of the one you follow. You can't point your mind to lovely things because your mind's too clouded. That's fine. I know one who is lovely, who is pure, who is right, who is noble. And you can look at him anytime you want in Scripture, in prayer, and in community with other people. Think on the character of the one you follow. I think one of the bottom lines this morning is that changing our mindset is not something we do alone. He is with us and brings us peace. Y'all, we can't change our mindset without peace. We just can't. So we need him, and he brings peace. So there may be some of you in the room this morning who are saying things like this: I need more time to digest this. This has been a lot. I need more time. Like, we can't do a 4-week series on mindset. You can't give me all these concepts and they're magically going to help me moving forward. I need more time to sit in this. Well, I will tell you, part of this you'll sit in for the rest of your life. Why? Because it's war. But I'm going to do something today that I've never done as a pastor, ever. I'm going to recommend a book. I do not recommend books. I recommend one book, and I love it, and I read it all the time. It's called the Bible. But in this case, I'm going to recommend another book for anyone who just needs a little bit more time. And the person who wrote this book is a strong believer in Jesus, but this is not a religious book. This is a book about the way we think, okay? And it's called Soundtracks by a guy named John Acuff. And John Acuff is a Christian leader who works a lot in the business realm. But what John says is that the way we think, the way our brains operate, create like a soundtrack in the back of our life. Right? Anybody ever get like really stuck on a song? If you haven't, you're missing out. It's awesome. But there are times where I would say close to 80% of the time, if you ask me what song's in my mind, I can give you an answer. The problem is some of those songs I don't want to tell you that is in my head, okay? But the truth is like there are soundtracks to our life, and there's actually games that are played where you take like a movie and you take out the soundtrack of the movie and you put in a different one, and now the movie sounds totally different. Like when you add eerie music to something funny, now it sounds creepy, right? But there are soundtracks that live in the back of our head that just tell us things, and some of those soundtracks are things like I'll never be enough. Or the soundtrack, I will always be alone. No one understands me. The things that hurt me in my childhood are going to be with me for the rest of my life, and I'm never going to be okay. And it's just songs that exist in the back of our mind that cloud our ability to move forward. So in this book, what he says is when you're overthinking and you find your brain doing things you don't want it to do, there are 3 questions that you should ask about any thought that seems to be clouding your mind. And I think these 3 questions are important because I think they're related to Philippians 4. The first question is this: is it true? The thing that you're thinking, is it true? Or is there a part of you that goes, I know it's not true, but I can't stop thinking it? So what's really interesting is you could look at somebody and, the most beautiful woman in the world could look at her friend and say, I feel ugly. And her friend could say, that's not true, but it doesn't change anything about what she thinks. Right? Just because someone tells you what you're thinking isn't true doesn't mean your life's going to change. You'll continue to think the untrue thing. So the first is it true? The second is this: is it helpful? Is this thing that's running through my mind actually helpful to my life? Does it actually change anything? Because there's a lot of things you could think that just lead you to more shame, that have nothing to do with helping you. It's just shame after shame after shame. And it actually makes you more stuck to think about those things. So is it true? Is it helpful? And you could think something's helpful and true and it still not be okay. And the third question is this: is it kind? Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it kind? Here's what I can tell you from the gentleness of our Father above. If what you're thinking hurts you and causes you to think poorly about yourself, it's not from Him. There is nothing that the Lord wants to offer you that makes you feel worse about yourself, because you were made in the image of God. Is it true? Is it helpful? And is it kind? I didn't say, is it nice? I didn't say, is it covered in flowers? Kindness is caring enough about yourself to tell yourself the truth. Is it true? Is it helpful? Even if it's hard, is it kind to you? Does it lead you towards something positive? Those are the questions that are asked in the book, and honestly, I think they're the right questions for us today. So, as you leave today, many of you know we've been teaching in our children's ministry what we're learning in here to try to create some conversations on the way home that we simply call car conversations. The question today that you can ask on the way home with your children is, when you think about things that are true, noble, and kind, what comes to mind? What comes to mind? What are the things that come to your mind when you think on those things? And then you can remind your kids and remind each other that when we think on these things, God brings peace. And peace is what guards us. Okay? So as we wrap up, worship team, come on up. As we wrap up this morning, there are 3 main points from this series that I want to draw back to because I don't want you to miss. There are 3 things that when I thought about what we've done the last 4 weeks that I think need to be reset. Here they are. Number 1, we must replace our thoughts, not just remove them. So it's not as easy as just saying, God, take this from me, and then we move on. No. We take this from me, and now we create space to put thoughts in that represent who He is. Remove and replace. 2, we must capture every thought, not just the ones that we think He should change. We are not capable of knowing what thoughts we should change. We capture all the thoughts and we bring them to the Lord and say, hey, I need your help sorting through this. We capture every thought. And then today, 3rd, we must think on His character and let it point us to healthier thoughts. So what's His character? Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right and pure and lovely and admirable and excellent and praiseworthy. Those are the things we need to think on. Because the bottom line is this: changing our mindset is not something we do alone. He is with you and brings peace. We say a lot here that you were never meant to do this alone. And that's true even in your thought life. You can't solve the battle in your mind alone. You need Him and you need others.